The exact number of ethnicities in Africa is unclear, but it is estimated to be in the thousands. Cataloging these ethnic groups is challenging due to their vast diversity and constant evolution. Ethnicities generally consist of people who share common characteristics such as language, culture, leadership, or territory. Essentially, ethnicity is a social construct formed through interactions within a community. In Africa, these constructs have been shaped historically by African traditions. However, European colonial influences have played a crucial role in the past 500 years. Traditionally, communities offer protection and wealth in exchange for loyalty and labor, creating distinct cultures, languages, and power hierarchies. In many countries, while there might not be overt demonstrations of hatred, it is still uncommon for ethnic groups to live in genuine understanding and brotherhood. Often, people from different ethnic backgrounds regard each other with subtle politeness and underlying suspicion. This cordial distrust means that, while interactions may appear friendly on the surface, there is a lack of deep, sincere connections and mutual trust between groups. The fear of the unknown or unfamiliar often keeps communities at a distance, preventing true unity and cooperation. Sadly, Africa has been continually plagued by the devastating effects of ethnic conflict, including civil wars and genocides. From clashes between the Ndebele and Shona of Zimbabwe, Oromo and Tigrayans in Ethiopia, Fulani and Malinke in Guinea, through to the ethnic cleansings in Darfur and Rwanda, the continent has suffered immensely due to ethnic discord. The most concerning case is Nigeria, a nation that has yet to embrace its potential role as a leader in Africa and the Black world. Despite its size and resources, Nigeria remains a fragile giant, weakened by deep-rooted ethnic divisions and animosities. The Biafran Civil War, which took place at the end of the 1960s, is a stark reminder of these issues, resulting in the tragic deaths of 2 million Igbo people. Even today, Nigeria struggles with ethnic tensions that hinder its progress and unity, preventing it from achieving its full potential in not only Africa, but on the global stage. Cheikh Anta Diop, one of the most influential scholars in African history, demonstrated that the diverse Black populations across Africa share a common heritage. He showed that Africans have the same religious foundations, cultural norms, philosophies, linguistic groups, and even similar names. Following in his footsteps, scholars like Théophile Obenga and Mbogbasong have further reinforced and expanded upon his findings through their extensive research. If we all share the same fundamental identity, it is because we all descend from the peoples of the Great Lakes and the Nile Valley. Our ancestors migrated from East Africa to the rest of the continent in several waves. While the differences between Africans today are real, they are relatively superficial. These differences are simply variations of the same core identity. How did tribalism become such a major problem in Africa? This critical history will shock you as an African or person of African descent. African philosophy, also known as Ma'at, states that human societies were built in relation to the laws of the universe's creation. In ancient Africa, the clergy or priesthood ensured that Ma'at was applied throughout the land. Different ethnic groups, castes, and clans within a state were seen as part of a collective whole. The king, as God's representative, was responsible for assembling these groups into a harmonious and orderly society. Each ethnic group maintained political control over its territory, preserving its culture and language, while the language of the royal clan became dominant. Roles were divided between the royal power and the ethnic groups, who were represented on a council that assisted the king in governing. This council, made up of all ethnic components, elected or confirmed the new king unanimously upon the death of a ruler, establishing a federal political system. How does this contrast from the culture of Europeans? In Europe, the state is traditionally built from the top down, unlike in Africa, where it is constructed from the bottom up. The dominant ethnic group imposes its language and culture on the entire country, leading to the gradual disappearance of other languages and cultures. This approach assumes that not everyone can agree, embracing an ideology of confrontation. The government is always met with opposition, and differences are settled by the majority winning, even if it's just 51% of the vote. This is the European definition of democracy. A good case in point is France. a unicultural state. Regional languages like Occitan, Alsatian, and Norman have nearly vanished in favor of French, which originated in the Paris region. Local cultures have become largely folkloric. These differing approaches explain why European states have historically experienced numerous revolts and revolutions, while Africa, before the European slave trade, generally enjoyed peace and prosperity. Several famous foreign travelers to Africa have commented on the peaceful nature of African societies. Leo Africanus, who journeyed across North and West Africa in the 16th century, praised the harmonious and organized communities he encountered. Scottish explorer Mungo Park, who traveled through West Africa in the late 18th century, noted the kindness and peacefulness of the locals. Richard Francis Burton, an English explorer in the 19th century, observed the peaceful interactions among different ethnic groups in East Africa. Mary Kingsley, an English writer and explorer, traveled through West Africa in the late 19th century and highlighted the welcoming nature and strong sense of community she found. These accounts from travelers like Africanus, Park, Burton, and Kingsley provide historical evidence of the peace and harmony that characterized many African societies before European disruptions. Their observations emphasize the rich social structures and mutual respect that were prevalent in African communities. This peaceful coexistence was noted by many who ventured into Africa and documented their experiences. Today, many Africans, often unaware of their historical traditions, strive to emulate the Western model of democracy, frequently encountering significant challenges and failures in the process. Ethnic conflict has been especially prevalent in Africa, largely due to the lingering effects of colonial rule. During the scramble for Africa, colonial powers divided the continent and reshaped its political territories, causing lasting regional disorganization. After militarily defeating Africa, European colonists targeted the destruction of African cultural and intellectual structures. Many priests were killed, educational centers known as houses of life were destroyed, and sacred forests were burned. Holy places were desecrated, and objects of worship were stolen and taken to museums. Christian and Islamic authorities demonized African spirituality, erasing structures that promoted divine harmony, balance, and order, known generally as Ma'at. This led Africans to adopt confrontational attitudes. Additionally, colonists compartmentalized tribal identities, labeling ethnic groups as separate groups with no connections to each other. They classified these groups hierarchically, fostering divisions and exploiting antagonisms to maintain control. Africans were miscategorized by Europeans in ways that have caused deep divisions and conflicts. German and later Belgian colonists divided the Banyarwanda people, who shared a common kingdom, language, culture, and religion, by exploiting their socio-professional castes. They deliberately broke the bonds between the Hutu working class and the Tutsi ruling class, who had previously coexisted peacefully. This manipulation led to severe animosity and violence, culminating in the Rwandan genocide, where nearly 800,000 Tutsis and later 400,000 Hutus were killed since the 1990s. During British rule, Nigeria's northern region was largely isolated from the southern and eastern regions. The distribution of wealth was uneven, with the Igbo people in the southeast enjoying greater prosperity due to palm oil and petroleum resources. In contrast, the Hausa in the north and the Yoruba in the southwest were less affluent. The southeastern Igbo, being geographically isolated and wealthy, were marginalized and labeled as outsiders. This marginalization, combined with religious differences, further alienated the Igbo. In 1966, after the coup of the Five Majors, Nigeria descended into a bloody civil war. The Hausa-controlled government took drastic measures to eliminate the Igbo population, who had chosen to secede and form the nation of Biafra. The conflict soon turned into an ethnic cleansing, with over 1 million Igbo people starved to death. This tragic event highlighted the deep ethnic divisions and the severe consequences of political and economic disparities in Nigeria. It is also worth noting that the British, who enforced a colonial practice of indirect rule. In this system, traditional African leaders and institutions were used to govern. Although created by Sir Frederick Lugard and initially appearing benign, indirect rule proved insidious. It often involved appointing leaders who did not truly represent their communities. This system mixed ethnic groups with traditional ties to specific lands and led to corrupt minority governments exploiting their populations based on ethnicity. When European colonists took the majority of Africa's material resources, they left ethnic groups to compete for the remaining scraps. Upon gaining independence, Africans, often convinced they had no historical models of their own, adopted the unilingual, unicultural, and centralized state system. Ethnic tensions were so strong that colonial languages were chosen as official languages to maintain neutrality, causing local languages and cultures to fade. Ethnic identities became a primary factor in politics, with Africans voting based on ethnic affinity. Political parties were essentially regional and ethnic groups, and the largest ethnic group typically took power, defining this as democracy. When election results were respected, the president usually represented his ethnic group and served neo-colonial interests, reserving the majority of resources for his people. This left other ethnic groups feeling excluded and frustrated. With borrowed top-down power structures, ordinary people felt unheard, creating tensions that could lead to conflict. Other ethnic groups bided their time, hoping to gain power and enjoy its benefits. Many plotted to make this happen, and imperialist powers exploited these divisions to extend their influence over Africa. So where do we go from here? We will follow the blueprint of Cheikh Anta Diop. In Africa, the diverse peoples are more accurately described as nations rather than tribes, as they each have their own history, territory, culture, and language. Recognizing these nations by name in constitutions and organizing political jurisdictions around them can prevent conflicts. Next, each African country should become a federation of nations, with each nation having control over its territory and its culture and language officially recognized. Political power should be organized at 3 levels within each nation: an assembly of political parties, a clan assembly, and a governor elected by the clan assembly. At the federal level, there should be an assembly of political parties and an assembly of nations, with the head of state elected by the Assembly of Nations. The head of state must be approved unanimously and govern in alliance with the nations and political parties. Reintroducing the principles of Ma'at, which emphasize harmony, balance, and consensus, can ensure peace among nations. Education should center on Ma'at, teaching children to value peace and justice. Local clergy will oversee the state's functioning, ensure the moral integrity of leaders, and facilitate harmonious governance. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for watching. Until the lions have their own historians, the tales of the hunt will always glorify the hunter.